Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here in Denver, Colorado, joined by my friend and partner, Wes Brown in Rapid City, South Dakota. How are you, buddy?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. Friday, my wife's car went in the shop, and then this morning my car took a dump. So I'm carless today, but I'm working through it. My friend Dan came through for me and let me borrow his car. So, I joke about starting over 2021. Man, I hope I don't have to do this a third time, but so we'll see. It's the way it is.
At least you're not homeless.
Well, that's true. There's always an upside.
There's always an upside. You have heat
it's
and
all
you have
relative.
food.
I got heat and I got food, and other people have it way worse than I do. So you just got to roll with it. So it's all relative.
Well, I feel pretty good after hearing that story. So
yeah,
I'm not going to say anything about myself. I'm not going to push it. All right. Well, we have another great episode for you this week. I'm very excited to talk to this gentleman. It's somebody that I recently got to see his work in person. Our guest this week is Inventor artist, Metalsmith, Ira Sherman. He's a master jeweler, world-renowned sculptor, designer, and engineer. Ira's work has been featured in major publications such as Wired, Popular Mechanics, and Metalsmith, and has been exhibited throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, Israel, and Japan. His website, if you want to check it out as you're listening to this podcast, is irasherman.com. It's IRASHERMAN.com. Ira, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Just laying back, finish those last two pieces that are at Bitfactory gallery, so I can kind of lay back now and clean things up and reorganize and think about the next project.
Those are phenomenal pieces, and like I said, I'd seen your work on your website and via Facebook, which is how I became familiar with your work. But it was a whole different deal going to Bitfactory and seeing them in person. And I want to discuss those pieces a little bit later on. I want to talk about how you got started doing this. And before I do that, I want you to explain what all you do. You work in many different forms. You do these sculptures that you can wear, but you're also a jeweler and you do some other things. So if you could tell our listeners what all that you do.
Sure. The range of my work, first of all, it's all metal. That's pretty much exclusively the media I use. It ranges from commercial jewelry to very high-end art pieces, almost museum pieces in jewelry, public art. I've done some large sculptures for public venues, and then liturgical work. I certainly have done plenty of that. And then the work that I really hold near and dear is these mechanized sculptures, where some are the mechanics are the aesthetics, and the aesthetics are the mechanics. Others have to do with prosthesis and how it fits on the body and how you interact with it. There is a segue between jewelry and the last group of work, the prosthesis that you wear on your body, in that jewelry is worn on your body. It's in contact. It fits around your neck, your fingers. So imagine a sculpture where your whole body gets into. Every inch of that sculpture could be considered a piece of jewelry.
And you are not originally from Denver. You grew up in Chicago, Illinois?
Yeah, I was brought up on the north side of Chicago, West Rogers Park. My background was pretty normal kid in Chicago, always loved taking things apart, always loved playing with toys, loved going through the garbage, still do, by the way. Looking for that really cool find that I can take apart and maybe reinvent. From Chicago, we moved to Skokie, Illinois. And I went to high school at Niles North High School. And when I went to high school, I started doing my first little welding projects. And I was in the art club, and you could see the direction where I'm going once I got into high school. Early on, however, my mother noticed I had this little talent of doodling and playing and reassembling things. And she was tipped off by a teacher I had in first grade. And when she noticed that, when both my teacher and my mother noticed that, they sent me to art school. And here I am in Evanston, Illinois, taking art classes with adults on Saturdays. And I loved it. We did enamels and we did weaving and we did painting. And so I got a real early dose of being an artist as a kid, about 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And then back then, I'll quick go back to high school where I started doing some welding in the art club. But my real interest at that time was biology and chemistry. And I went to college to study biology and chemistry. One of the classes I took in college, just to kind of even things out and mellow out the academic stress, was to make art. So I took a few art classes. I took a sculpture class. I took drawing class. I really loved the art classes always. And I found the academics a little tedious, and always gravitated towards the art. And for the people I met, the students who were artists were also lots of fun to hang out with. One of the classes I took while in college, I was out here actually in Colorado. I was taking a summer session, and I wanted to sign up for printmaking, but the class was closed, and the only class I could get into was a jewelry class. And to this point, this is my junior year in college. At this point, I had never even touched jewelry, had no idea what making jewelry was like. And I had a very good teacher and learned a lot about the basic techniques of soldering and finishing and setting some basic stones. And I loved it. And to tell you the truth, it was the only A+ I ever got in any class in my life. So now I'm validated, right? So I head back to Iowa where I'm finishing up school. And lo and behold, one of the teachers there is a really well-known jeweler. And I started taking classes with him and, raised my skill level quite a bit. I realized how far you can go with jewelry. Jewelry also gave me insight to just how to basically manipulate metal. Granted, silver and gold are very malleable and they're very easy to manipulate into shape. But with the right tools and the right techniques, steel is also very easy to manipulate, almost just as easy as jewelry objects. So by experimenting with jewelry objects, by learning how the metal forms and bends and making these little sculptures in gold and silver, mostly silver, I put together these little maquettes that I would imagine would be bigger. I never could build them. I didn't have the skill at the time. We're talking about the early 70s. But always in the back of my head, that interest in these little objects getting very large, even imagining myself walking in and out of these objects, even though they're on my finger, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that exercise. So we'll put that away for a second. My father in Chicago was a machinery dealer. He mostly used machinery, metal fabrication machinery, punch presses, lathes, drill presses, all the stuff you see in a metal shop. And I'd go down there and hang out with him. And he didn't know what I was doing. And I just go around and play with these big machines. And sometimes some of them were actually plugged in, So you flip the switch and this giant lathe starts moving. And you feel this power of these machines and you watch how they move. And back then, the aesthetics of machinery was more curvilinear. Nowadays, when you look at machines, they're more blocky and geometric, mostly because that's how engineering is done these days. But back then, there was a lot of castings, almost like the old sewing machines, those old, beautiful, curvilinear machines. And that stuck in my head. I don't know, it just got buried somewhere along the line. That watching the machines move and looking at those beautiful curvilinear lines and the kineticness, where the mechanics have a beauty to it. This stuck in my head. Okay, so now it's in the mid-70s. And I also have another interest, and that interest was I was a big fan of Mission Impossible and James Bond and all the spy movies and sci-fi movies. But the one guy that always stuck out in my head that I would love in these movies was Q. Q's laboratory had all these great devices in it, and they helped James do whatever he's going to do. So I was thinking I should make my art and my jewelry a device that does something, that addresses some societal issue. Eventually, I started working on that. As I'm younger, I'm working on issues that I'm afraid of, things that disturb me, social issues. As I get older, I I'm dividing these things. One side is a whole group of artwork that's purely lyrical and beautiful, and the other side, and almost practical in some ways, like public art, liturgical work, jewelry. These are all very beautiful, very elegant. But then the other side has to do with disturbing issues of why people can't come to agreements, issues that have to do with sexual morality. And I was able to develop bodies of mechanized work that would actually take these issues and find a panacea, a workable solution to these problems. So now my mechanical devices, based on Q's laboratory, is making these beautiful machines and devices that solve impossible problems in society. So there's where my first really strong direction goes into the artwork that you see today. And that was back in the late 70s. So name a couple. Like one was, I was camping, and these are really absurd things. I was camping and I got a tick on me. And about a week later, I came down with Colorado tick fever. Really got me sick. Oh, this is where I was going to school in college. I always wanted to take vengeance on that tick. And I made a device that pulls ticks off your body at 300 ticks per minute. So it really hauls ass. It's a gasoline-powered device. And this thing's going, and it's pulling, it's actually ripping up your skin pretty good. And as you know, you can't step on ticks and kill them. So I had a built-in flamethrower and built-in insect dispenser. So, this you get the idea, multi-purpose device, okay? Another one had to do with vanity. At the same time, I was noticing I had an abnormal amount of ear hair growing out of my ears and my nose. And I wanted to make a device that would take care of that. And I always was intrigued by those little devices that were like rotary trimmers. You turn them, and they remount your nose. So I hooked one of those up to a gasoline engine, an 049 gasoline engine. You pull the string, this thing just rips up into you. So there's this absurdity where it solves this problem of nose hair and ear hair. And at the same time, it's just totally absurd. You really can't use it. And that theme followed through in my work for quite a while. One of my favorite ones was the Pavlovian trainer. And this was a device that forced people to, if they talked too much, it would slap their mouth shut and a little bell would ring. So it would train you not to talk. And it was this really beautiful helmet made out of, I think it was steel and bronze and brass and a little bit of silver. And if you tried to move your mouth too much when you talk loud, it would activate a high pressure air switch. Air would go from these tanks by the sides of your ears. A little muzzle would slap your mouth shut and a little bell would ring. Ding. And that would solve the problem of over verbosity. And that was a big hit because everybody knows people who talk too much. Often I'm accused of that too. So I often model my own piece. Another one that was actually unveiled in Judge Nade's courtroom in Denver, the district courtroom that was kind of remodeled like a Perry Mason courtroom. We did a drama of a piece called The Arbitrator. And this was a piece that forces two people to negotiate in good faith. If they try to stall for negotiations, time ticks away, pressure increases on them, pushes on their head, squeezes their body, but they're still chest to chest. And if they stall too much, both of them get their skulls cracked pneumatically. It depends how much pressure you put in the system, but yes, it does work. It was this absurdity, and we unveiled this thing in a courtroom setting with a real judge and real attorneys, and it was a wonderful drama. And I just got me hooked that, my pieces fit into a theatrical venue also. It worked really well. That's the piece. And we did that in the courtroom. And the news media came down, and two of the news media thought it was a serious, real device. And two knew me. I forget what stations it were. They stuck around. The other two walked out when they realized this was a farce. What I realized at that point was that my work takes on a plausitive reality that people take quite seriously. And I'm thinking, as a plausitive reality, what a great tool as a hook to get people engaged in my work. Make the work really do something, get people imagining they're in it, they're feeling it, it's doing something on them, they're interacting with it. And then I think I got a great tool to to use to make this work, and when it comes to the conceptual development of these designs. One of the pieces in this collection of work called Panaceas to Persistent Problems was a pneumatic chastity belt. It was a piece of jewelry done only as a joke. It was like, all the other chastity belts you read about, just covers the woman up and she's got a lock and you can't get in and that kind of thing. But this is before I knew anything about the history of chastity belts. I didn't know even where they were, if or where they were invented. I just heard about this thing called the chastity belt. And I right away, as Q might redesign a chastity belt, I made one that works on pressurized air that shoots two stainless steel darts into the rapist. So if the rapist gets in an area where he shouldn't be, these darts go into him and it basically skewers him. When I made this piece, I used a Samsonite combination lock and a bunch of things that you just wouldn't think of for this type of device. And it came out as a beautiful piece of jewelry. Really, it was a great concept, but jewelry-wise, it was beautiful. Being a jeweler, being pretty well known with the jewelry community in Denver, when some of my friends saw me make this, they labeled me as the jeweler who makes chastity belts. And that label has stuck with me. I tried to shake it for quite a while, and I really didn't make any chastity belts for quite a while. This was in the 80s. And I really didn't make anything like that for quite a while until the late 90s. But it stuck with me. And while I'm dealing with that, I'm talking to friends and relatives about this device I made, and the conversations would sometimes segue into, boy, I was raped and I wish I had that thing on. These are friends, okay? These are people I've just known. And then I'm talking to more people, and pretty soon I find out I have a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances who have been sexually abused and attacked. I asked one of them, who was a close friend, what do you think about me making a whole exhibition based on interviews with men and women and putting into this sculpture what they'd like to see happen to the rapes? So this became a tool for inspiring me to figure out how I'm going to use the chastity belt as a framework to express different desires of the person who was attacked. A lot of things happened in these discussions. And all of a sudden it shifted me from, wow, wacko artist makes chastity belt in his garage sale. This is really a serious problem. This is something that people don't talk about. And, Me Too hasn't started yet. This is way before Me Too. And I put together an exhibition called Impenetrable Devices. The exhibition first showed here in Denver, and then it went to two different venues. It went to the National Ornamental Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, and then at Southern Illinois University's museum. And the idea behind this whole collection of chastity belts was each one represented a different thing, or a group of belts represented what these individuals, men and women, wanted to see happen to the rapists. It came into four categories, basically. One was, I want revenge. That would be the most common one you'd think of. Another one, but one was always, everybody said, I want the person apprehended and put in jail so they can never do this again. That was another one. Another person, all they wanted was a secure place to live. They were so afraid that someone could come into their house again that they wanted to live behind a security fence, a security apartment, and surveillance. Then one person, just one, very recently, in a very recent interview, said something I never heard before that really amazed me. And she said that, and this was a lady who was repeatedly raped by her father from the time she was like a child to the time she was 15 years old. And she said, I want to forgive my father and myself. To move on, she had to use forgiveness to get over what happened to her. And we'll talk about this later, but this is one of the most recent pieces. What came out of that discussion is what you see in the gallery, last week. And when these pieces are on exhibition, and people come down to see them, the conversation almost always evolves into conversations of sexual abuse. Usually it's, wow, look at that incredible detail. Look at the beautiful form. Look at the skills, all that. I would like to try it on. What does it feel like? These kind of things come up, but eventually there'll be a discussion that'll go around the gallery. And all of a sudden, this art exhibition opens up a safe place to talk about sexual abuse, which blew me away. I saw that in Memphis, and I just blew me away.
So in addition to opening this conversation about sexual abuse, it's also been controversial at times at some of the places it's been shown. Is that correct?
The controversy usually comes if a gallery takes it. And that's been the hardest thing, to find a gallery who will take the work, because the topic is not one that a board of directors usually likes to address. If they take it, there's usually, I'd say 90% of the discussion and the comments are good. Then there might be a comment that has to do with how dare you capitalize on rape victims? Make entertainment out of rape. I get that once in a while, not very often. And I always double check back to my friends who I know well, who have been assaulted, and say, is this for real? Do you feel this at all? Is this something I should be concerned about? And I certainly want to be sensitive to it. I'm not trying to make any money and capitalize on this. This is not the goal of the collection at all. I've made very little money. So I wouldn't say there's capitalization going on, but I find it's relevant. I think it's important art.
Yeah, it opens that dialogue for people, like you said, as they come through the gallery and see these pieces, they all feel something, but eventually it becomes a conversation of, hey, I was sexually abused, or I experienced this, or I know somebody that this has happened to. And it's not like like you said, you're not capitalizing on this, because this is really a collaboration between you and people that you interviewed and talked about their feelings and their experience and what they would like to see. You just kind of helped visualize what they were telling you as far as this body armor, this exoskeleton, this Chastity Couture, and made it a reality, right?
That's right. You touched on something which is really important. You said body armor. Besides the chastity belt being this framework to put these different conceptual ideas into the design, the overall design is safe but sexy. These are very beautiful, very sexy pieces, but they're also body armor, and they protect the woman pretty effectively. If anybody ever tried to attack her, again, plausibly, you can look at it and say, well, this is literal protection, but let's think of it as a plausible artistic concept. And then the male chastity belts are a little bit different. These prevent men from raping, yet still catharting their aggression. So this is a little different twist on how to use Chastity Couture.
Now, prior to you doing this work, have you heard of anybody else that had ever done anything in this vein whatsoever? Because I've never seen anything like this before.
No, I think I'm the only one in the world. There have been people who make chastity belts. Certainly, that's more on the sex toy type of thing. The bondage and discipline group. Those people certainly have made these things. Certainly, they were used as a symbolic device in the 1800s, 1900s. They never were really used literally. That I couldn't see anything when I did research on it. It seems like some Victorian author made this thing up, put it back in the days of chivalry, and people took it as a literal device that could be used. I don't see any evidence anywhere that these things were ever used or even existed in the context that we usually think of as knights and gallant knights in the Middle Ages,
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I was just thinking they did that in the Middle Ages. I bought into the whole rhetoric of it because I thought they did use chastity belts back in the day. So it's interesting that you say from your research that isn't true. That's interesting.
I haven't found anything that's that's real, that says it was real. I've seen people, talk about, oh, and when this happened, that happened. It's kind of like starting a conspiracy or a myth theory. But the only real thing I saw was it used in Victorian literature.
First of all, I think the work is brilliant, but I think it's intriguing when you go in, and I would be curious, I just had a conversation with Bill down at Bitfactory, the gallerist and owner of Bitfactory. Your initial reaction to it, I think, well, mine was, I should say, is I was like, wow, these are beautiful just as sculptural pieces. I had no idea the thought and the engineering behind them. They're just beautiful objects of art. And then you start having someone kind of explain what all these do and the thought behind it. And it's incredibly powerful. I'm just amazed at the thought and like I said, the engineering that goes into this, because they have moving parts.
Well, it goes much past the moving parts. Think about this. They're steel. Well, let me back up just a little bit. For me to use every part of my brain to make a piece of art, I have to know the craftsmanship, the concept. I got to be using the jeweler's techniques. I want it to mechanically work, but I want it to fit on the body comfortably. As a challenge for myself, it has to fit on a body and the person can walk down the runway comfortably in it. This is one of the ways I show the work, but it also is a huge challenge for me. And the reason it is that to make steel fit around the human body and have the person move within it, yet still have this incredible, beautiful elegance and form and mechanical function is mind-blowingly difficult. It takes a long time to get the aesthetics right on it. One of the challenges I have is the human body's curvilinear. So most of the forged elements you see, and I say forged, they're hammered out. Usually, these are not found objects, most of them. They're really made from scratch. And they're formed around a mannequin, assembled and double checked. The mannequin would be anatomically very accurate to a woman or a man. And then as I get the structure, the framework built, I start figuring out exactly how I want to put the mechanical components together. I need that framework first when I build these things. I got the concept, got it. Now, I need a framework. So I start working on an aesthetic form that works around the human body. And as I'm working on these elements that go around the body, I'm working now, how would this hinge work in a rotating curvilinear motion mechanically? This is a big deal. In most, if you look at any mechanical device, you'll see right angle connections between rotating components, or maybe a lever type of action. Rarely do you see a spiral curvilinear form, almost like a spline line in the 3 dimensions. And to get metal to move that way around the human body is quite a challenge, but also by the nature of how the body is, when you solve that problem, it becomes an elegant mechanical device. The natural lines of the body force you to make curvilinear connections that forms a beautiful motion that's not this geometric right angle motion. That's hard to describe, but that's it. Okay, so now I got my motion, I got my pieces fitting on the human body. Now I want to bejewel it. I want to make it glitzy. I want to add the craftsmanship, the jeweler's touch. So now I'll be putting gemstones into little caps of screws, and I'll be polishing edges and working very carefully to get each form that goes around the body very precise, make sure the edges and all the places where they connect are smooth and they form into each other to form a seamless sort of motion as it's worn. Okay, so that's now being worn. Take your body out of it. What's left? You have an exoskeletal form. So first it's built around the mannequin. Now you remove the mannequin and you get this killer exoskeletal form that you can see through it. When you went down to the gallery and you said, these are beautiful and elegant, you're responding to how metal forms around the human body in 3 dimensions and looking through it, through the negative space of the human body. If you want to have a better experience, get underneath the piece and look up, or get on top of the piece and look down. And you're going to see more of these lines interplaying with each other and interacting with each other. And if you really want to have a great experience, bring me down there and I'll fire them up and we'll make them move while you're watching. So it's, there's a lot of cool things we can do with these.
You talked or alluded to it in conversation here. These have been actually worn by models on a runway for different shows.
Yeah. We've done actually quite a few runway shows with these. But now I become an entertainer. It's now, before we're in a gallery, I'm an artist showing my sculpture, but now it becomes body sculpture and a fashion show, essentially. We've done most of the things we've done with these are pretty straightforward fashion shows. The model goes down the runway, maybe pauses, demonstrates some of the mechanical features, then walks back on the line. But sometimes I'll do a vignette, a short little story about, make something up about a dystopian world where people still want to be close to each other, but they're afraid and they have to protect themselves, but they still want to be sexy and they still want to form a relationship. Matter of fact, if you see those two pieces behind me, those were the two pieces used in that vignette. Those are large sculptures that fit on the woman and the man. And when they get on stage, these things start twitching almost like an insect and start moving. And you tend to, it protects you, but then it lets itself relax and invites you back into it.
Yeah, initially my mind went to more of a sci-fi kind of scenario, but then in talking with Bill, I was like, there's so much more going on here than just the sci-fi aspect. Like if you dive into them, like you said, and look at the design and the curves, and this work has evolved over time, because Bill was telling me that before you had to find a model that would kind of fit into that particular piece, but now you've made them so that they're fully adjustable. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. They really pretty much are designed for one size with some adjustment. There's a few of them that you can put a pretty big range of sizes into it. However, the challenge for me when we talk about that is not whether it fits different people. It's what's the cool mechanical adjustment I can add into the design that would allow this thing to adjust to different size people. It's the aesthetics of the adjustment mechanism more than will it fit somebody else. For me, that's the challenge.
And then these shows that you've put on with these pieces, are they just showcase the pieces, or do they benefit a cause of some sort?
Absolutely. They're almost, I would say I think we did about 8 shows. 7 of those 8 were fundraisers. I was part of a much bigger show. My line, my fashion line, was part of a much bigger line of other designers and performers. And these shows are used to raise money for arts organizations.
Nice.
Yeah.
So multifaceted as far as how the art is being not only displayed, but bringing consciousness to different elements, different issues, and then benefiting people all in one fell swing.
Yeah. I think it's kind of cool that it's the arts organizations that have the courage to allow my work to go on stage. They're the ones who seem to take the most appreciation for what they look like on stage. Granted, and this is something that I found really, really interesting about fashion shows. Fashion shows, I call it the crack cocaine of exhibition. You get this incredible high that lasts a few seconds and it's gone. Whereas making the piece, exhibiting the piece, is the long, very gratifying aspect of the work. And nobody in watching one of these fashion shows is going to have any idea how these pieces are put together. They won't have a chance, they don't have the time to consider it. Fashion shows are very quick, very action-packed. And they're great. I mean, they show the public that, oh, look, the work really is plausible. It can fit on the body. But it's not by any means my preferred venue for the work.
Just another venue so that people can get exposed to it, right?
right. And it gets me a chance to be an entertainer also. I can show the work off a little bit, you know.
You said there's been times where it's been difficult to get museums and galleries to take this work.
It's going on at this very moment. It's almost impossible to introduce yourself to a gallerist or a museum or a nonprofit without one, a proper introduction, somebody who knows your work who can introduce you. If you go in cold call, it's pretty much impossible. Because here you are with a portfolio, you're saying, I'm the guy that makes chastity belts, I make da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they look at you with this bewilderment because they never saw the work up close. You saw the work in the gallery. You got a chance to comprehend what it is, what's behind it. And also a lot of these venues, there's usually a board of directors that has to make a decision on what is going to be exhibited. So one person might be very passionate and get it, but it may not work with the other people who normally they want a different type of show, maybe a more populist show for their galleries. So I'm always, right now I'm looking, I'm always looking for a new venue for the work.
How did you happen to hook up with Bill and get the work to be displayed in Bitfactory?
Love the question. I just finished the pieces behind me, and I have a really cohesive body of work now, about 15 pieces, 20 pieces, and I got to show them. I said I didn't have any exhibitions lined up, and I want to show them. And I started going down Santa Fe, knocking on doors of galleries. And everybody that I thought would be a venue for my work. I mean, it has to be a larger gallery with good lighting. I mean, it has to be a venue that the work would look good in. And basically said, well, it's nice, but I'm not that interested. And you got to also think about, they're thinking of a couple things, not whether the work is good or bad necessarily, but also, can I sell this work? Am I wasting my money promoting this artist? I'm going to be putting money into this. So it takes quite a leap for a gallery owner or a gallerist to show my work and benefit from it financially. Okay. So I'm getting a haircut across the street from Bill, and I look at the outside of his gallery, and it's really cool with the metal and the windows. I just thought this was really cool. So after I got my haircut, I went across the street, I knocked on his door, and I had my little portfolio with me, and I had my iPad with me with some images. And Bill's a really nice guy. He says, "Come on in, let me see what you do and stuff." And he loved the work, not just liked it. He loved it, and he got it. He understood right away what it was about. I could tell him what it's about, and he can talk back and ask the questions that say, rather than, "Well, that's interesting. That's nice. Who would wear that?" It got into, I get it. He got it. He wanted to show the work in his gallery, and what Bill saw for was that it would bring people into his gallery and show that he's a much more eclectic gallerist than maybe some of the people in town here. And we did a show, and it was, in terms of numbers of people, it was unbelievably successful. I think you can quite safely say we had over 2,000 people visit the show. So it was quite successful. And we did some performance. It was just a wonderful time. We just had a great time Bill did a beautiful job laying the show out. We had some very special events that went along with the show, a fashion show, an artist discussion, and VIP unveiling, and a bunch of different things that made the show, picked up the momentum of the show. Fast forward, Bill has this regular yearly exhibition called No Show, and he invites some of his favorite artists to put a couple pieces in. And when Bill called me for this, I said, "I'm in." That's simple. I'm in. No argument, nothing. Just, I'm in. Do it. And he does a beautiful show. I said, "Everybody, come down there. Go down and check the show out. You'll see how lovely and how careful he thinks about how the work is displayed and the eclecticness of the artists." But they're all high quality art, all very high level work.
Yeah, and I got that same feeling when Todd and I went and seen him last year. Just like really sharp eye of what artists are doing and willing to kind of, take a chance and push the boundary a little bit for the visitors and to really get them seeing a different side of art. Cause I think a lot of galleries play it safe. They know who they want to sell to. So they're just kind of placating to them. But I think Bill is like, let's push the envelope a little bit. Let's push the viewer a little bit to get them out of their comfort zone. And he has an eye for picking out really quality stuff.
Yeah, he challenges his visitors. I think that's really important. Bill also has another quality, which maybe some of you have noticed. He's absolutely unpretentious. I mean, zero pretension. When you meet him, he's genuine. He's the real thing. Everything he says, everything you see, there's no pretension here, and it sets the artist at ease. I think it makes us want to be around him and exhibit with him.
You hit the nail right on the head, which is why I was drawn to Bitfactory, my initial discovery of it. And then, chatting with Bill the first time around, I was like, this guy's, like you said, he's the real deal and totally unpretentious, and he's engaging. He greets people, every person that comes in that doorway. If he's there, he's going to greet you and engage you in some way. And I think that's an important characteristic of a good gallerist. The day that I went down and I saw your work, he was having full-on conversations with two other people that had come in the gallery, particularly about your work. I mean, he talked about some other stuff, but I was overhearing as I was walking through the gallery and looking at the other work. He was really taking the time to explain, who you were, what your art's about, show how, some of the, obviously he could make it move because he didn't have the setup, but he could, open up the heart of heartfelt and show the other piece. Shoot, I lost the name. What's the name of the other?
Call it E-Detox. That's
E-Detox. That's it.
We're already doing a segue into another series of work that I'm on right now. So it's a good direction. Let me talk just a minute about heartfelt, because again, I said each of these pieces has different mechanical and aesthetic purposes. Heartfelt was the one where, say, with the Chastity framework, safe but sexy is the theme. How do you express forgiveness? And what does forgiveness mean if you can do it? And what forgiveness meant to this lady was that she can love again, she can care again, she can accept somebody back into her life again. So I thought, what would do that? How could I do this? So I got this idea of taking a heart and putting it on the outside of the body, a real anatomically perfect human heart, cast in bronze. All the arteries and veins that feed the heart and go into the, through the rest of the body become the exoskeletal forged out design of this Chastity Couture. So now the exoskeleton that protects you are the arteries and veins that were once inside your body. Your heart is exposed, and the heart starts beating. And when it beats, these lobes open up. They're on a timer, or you can do it just mechanically, but they're on a timer. And when they open up, they reveal a gold-leafed interior with synthetic rubies and gemstones inside, and a little bit of silver sheen. And it's just this gorgeous, beautiful thing. You don't know what it is. It just opens up, and you see this beauty, and it pulses. And it's actually quite mesmerizing. Most people who see it operating say they can't stop looking away from it for some reason. At the same time, between the legs covering the vagina is another piece of jewelry. And that piece of jewelry has another synthetic ruby, a silver kind of cover, and little cubic zirconiums all around the edge of it. And the idea is that when you can now let love back into your body again, it opens and closes as the heart opens and closes and beats. This image you're showing is a slightly side view of the front of the sculpture. You can also see on this piece, there's a corset of forged out steel that goes around the waist, and these screen type forms. And these represent the couture aspect of the design. These are mechanisms, and they have a concept, but they're also very lovely and can be worn on the body as dresses or fashion will be worn on the body.
It's very elegant. Like I said, initially my brain went to the whole almost like alien movie type of thing with this exoskeleton. But the more time with it, I was like, this is more fashion oriented. It is sci-fi in a way, but there's much more going on with it as far as the elegance. And like you said before, the curves, the design of it, and then knowing the thought behind it is it just blew me away. I couldn't stop looking at it.
Yeah, it's definitely couture. I mean, I've seen French couture shows on TV and stuff. This fits right into that, like top level. This is couture. I love it.
Made out of steel.
Yeah.
Yeah, the medium is a little different than most couture, but it's pretty phenomenal. Here on this image you're showing, you'll notice there's a lot of red lines, or red tubes going into the heart. These are actual functional airlines that go out of the heart to the pneumatic system that makes these lobes open and close. Inside the heart is an air manifold where all the air from the air tanks on the side of the hips, there's actually 2 air tanks next to the corset. That high pressure air feeds into the heart and then it's distributed to the different pneumatic systems that open up the lobes to the heart. So I integrate. Remember I was saying before that one of the things I did on my early work was the aesthetics are the mechanics, the mechanics are the aesthetics. While Chastity Couture tends to function or lean towards the aesthetic side of metal design, I still keep the aesthetics and mechanics working in these designs. So it's not just tubing coming out of the heart. The heart actually has the function of distributing the pressure, much like it distributes blood through your system, powering the piece.
It's so beautiful, Ira. I can't begin to. You just need to go down and check out the show that's running for. Well, when this airs, you'll have one more week to see it down at Bitfactory. But do yourself a favor and get down there and see this work in person. I was just thinking that even without all that stuff around it, all the the corset and everything else that's incorporated it, just the heart itself, casting that heart and looking at that heart because it's the exact size anatomically correct, right?
Right.
It's that in itself is just stunning. It's beautiful. Was it hard to work with that gold leaf?
No, actually gold leaf is quite a joy to work with. It's compared to working with, carrot gold and other jewelers' techniques. Gold leafing is a delight. It's a much better, much easier to put gold leaf on a piece than gilded, or gold plated. It's lovely. You just sit and listen to music and gently lay these little pieces of gold leaf down on it, and watch the things, start to shimmer. It's really, if you never did any gold leaf, look it up on the internet and go play with it. It's fun. Anybody can do it. It's not, gold leafing itself is not a very high technique that takes a lot of time to master, like certain metalsmithing and jewelry techniques. I'm going to talk about technique a minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. I'm a jeweler, and I've spent a lot of time studying and mastering technique to get the metal to do what I wanted to do and predict where it's going to go. From the time I touch a raw piece of metal to the time it's a fine piece of jewelry with gems in it, I pretty much know where I'm going because I know the technique I'm going to be using. I started working with steel, and I really did not have refined technique back in the 70s and 80s. I'd fumble along and I'd get the metal to do kind of what I want. But then I got introduced to the blacksmithing world. And there's an amazing organization in Colorado called the Rocky Mountain Smiths. And they're very open to anybody. You don't have to be a great artist, a great blacksmith. Anybody can come down and learn blacksmithing skills from them. And they have these wonderful workshops up in the mountains that I would attend. And I've attended them for the last 20 years. And I learned a whole bunch of technique that I could use to form these shapes I only imagined in my head. So by learning the technique, now my imagination can come alive. I can make what I can imagine. And structurally, it'll do what I want it to do. And this has been the rule for almost all of my learning experiences and working with metal. I have something I want to do. I have an idea in my head, but I have no idea how I'm going to get there. and I have to research out the technique that allows me to get to that point.
So there's a lot of trial and error over time.
Unbelievable amounts of trial and error, and you better enjoy it, because you'll never achieve what you want to achieve if you don't enjoy the trial and error process. On this piece, Heartfelt, for every part that came out beautifully on that, there were 2 or 3 that just weren't quite right. I'm using them for something else, but they just weren't quite right for what I wanted. Maybe the technique I needed to refine a little bit more. Maybe the texture wasn't quite right. Maybe the way it curved around the body was just not going to do it. And you toss the piece, go on, next, but enjoy it, because each time you work on it again and again, you improve your skills. The joy of learning a skill and mastering it is hard to describe. If you haven't learned a skill like piano or percussion, metalsmithing, or any dance is a great one. And master or work at it. Try to master it, because it's really a joy.
And it gives you that foundation, another jumping off point to go explore your work in a different direction. Once you have that foundation, then you can start breaking the rules and going where your mind wants it to go, right?
Yeah, I think that's the rule for almost any good art. You build a foundation, you expand on the foundation. There's something else happens that as you experiment and as you make work, you think of new ideas that you just began to explore on the project you just worked on. So and here's a great example, because I'm doing this right now. To solve the problem of forgiveness on the structure of a chastity belt, I decided I'm going to use a heart. I didn't think consciously that I'm taking an organ from the inside of the body, putting it on the outside of the body, and making this piece based on that theme. It was just a heart that would do something, and the aesthetics of the arteries and veins work beautifully with the form, okay? So that's where it started. And then I thought, well, wait a second, what other organs inside the body can I add meaning to and bring it to the outside of the body? And the one that came to mind right away were kidneys. Kidneys have to do with detoxifying your body. They take poisons out of your body. So the concept I decided to do was use real kidneys again, anatomically perfect kidneys, and have the kidneys do something redemptive. Take the poisons, in this case, the emotional toxins of your body, and turn them into something else as they flow through the kidneys. So when these kidneys open up, you'll see these butterflies inside of them, and they're all gold leaf inside. So they have this beautiful elegance, and it moves. It moves like that. It also has a back piece along the lower back and the butt where the piece flares out like a dress. Yeah, there's a good image of it. So that one's down at the gallery. And the third one is going to have to do with hope. And the ultimate hope in this world is that children are brought into this world and change the world. Without children, without birth, without reproduction, the world's dead. Nothing's going to happen. There is no hope. So the final piece of these three is going to be dealing with that topic. So now of course I'm going to use the ovaries, and I'm going to use the uterus, I'll use the vagina, and I'll take all these reproductive organs, I'll take a penis and work on ways to integrate these forms into a lovely piece that talks about reproduction but hope.
This last part of the series that you've been working on, when did you start these last three pieces?
COVID.
Oh, COVID was the...
Thank you, COVID. I mean, I had a very severe tragedy in my life. It'll be 2 years ago coming up in August, and it really shut me down. And I really didn't think I was going to be making much work. I didn't do anything since it happened. So 6-7 months pass, and then COVID comes in, and I'm going, I'm not inspired. Nothing's happening. Just closing down. And I think it was the first week in March, I started thinking of this interview I had with this woman, which was 2 years prior to making the piece. And I talked to other friends during that time and throw out some ideas, but the idea of the heart came up. And And all of a sudden, this is one of those miracle things. I can't tell you what's going on exactly, but the floodgates opened, and designs started coming out, ideas started coming out. The patience to make the work was there again. The drive to experiment, and then of course the logical progression of new pieces. It all started up all over again, just like what's been going on for most of my life.
So if there's anything good that's coming out of COVID, you've been able to produce this new work and explore this series even further and incorporate some new things. How long does it take to do one of these pieces? Obviously, each piece has its own elements, so it would be hard to say exactly how long it takes because you have to troubleshoot stuff. But so how long did it take you to do Heartfelt?
Well, Heartfelt, these pieces, when you make a piece of art, when I make a piece of art in the studio, I need a big block of time to get the momentum going to complete the piece. If I'm being stopped by lots of interruptions, by family crisis, by something else, I just can't complete this, and the whole process becomes maddeningly frustrating. Here comes COVID. Nothing, no pressure put on me at all. Go to the studio, work 8 to 10 hours a day, just like back in college, and really focus on what you want to do, what I want to do in the studio. Or I'm talking to myself, God, now you can really focus. You aren't being interrupted by anything. Get going, man. This is cool. And I did that for 3 months straight for Heartfelt. Every day, 6 to 8 hours a day for 3 months. That's how long it takes. And the usual piece, that's going straight, right? So if I'm doing another large piece, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I might work a week at a time, break, work another week. So it could take me a whole year to make a piece. So these do not just come off the factory floor. I mean, these are really time-consuming, carefully done pieces of sculpture.
It's amazing. And then E-Detox, how long did that piece take you?
That went a little quicker for a couple of reasons. I knew where I was going with it. Where the Heartfelt, I just experimenting with large castings in bronze and weren't sure quite how the hinges were going to work. So I learned a lot from Heartfelt. So I could put E-Detox together in about 2 months.
Wow.
Now E-Detox has a couple parts that wouldn't work in the gallery there. They're just too big. They distract actually a little bit from the elegant form you see in the gallery. But when it's on the runway, it'll have a chainmail train and some other little things. It might also have a head component that talks about sensing a smile in your face. So when you smile, your face expands. The little sensor would pick that up, and that would make the kidneys open up. The idea that as you relax and smile, it responds to that. So this piece has more coming. And each component added could be considered a whole other sculpture sometimes. Like the headpiece will be definitely a different sculpture, but relate to the other sculpture.
Wow. And this isn't the first time you've done headdresses, right?
No, I'm looking at 2 right now, actually. Two big ones hanging from my ceiling. Yeah, I like headdresses. They're, hats are always cool in couture. And when I do a hat, it's like no other, as you would imagine. So pretty cool.
The piece that you're currently working on, how far along are you with that piece?
Conceptual. Just drawing. Yeah, just drawing.
So obviously to engineer this stuff, it's doing a lot of research before you even, touch a piece of metal or start working with these pneumatic devices. How long does it take you to research some of this stuff? I mean, you're probably spending hours on the internet, I imagine.
Yeah and no. A lot of times I'll see something that reminds me of a form that would work for this or a mechanism that would work. I'll give you an example. I was just talking to my brother. He's a pilot. And he was talking about how the rudder and the front wheels of his airplane work together when he presses these pedals. So there's a push, pull. One thing goes this way and one thing goes that way. Okay. And now I'm imagining, here's a piece on the chest or the body that would push and pull and torque. How would I make that fit with a piece of elegant sculpture on the body? So this is an example of where a conversation can lead to an idea and eventually a form. Another one that I did some research on is I've always been plagued by the mechanical function of making something move that wasn't straight, like a piston moving, like an air cylinder going in and out, or a lever going dick, 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 or dick, dick. Everything is on this right angle thing. Nothing fits around the body. And then I was looking up these things research on prosthesis, okay? I was using that for an inspiration for a piece. And I came across these things called air muscle. And back in the 50s, these were these flexible tubes that when they inflated, they got short, but they could fit and curve around a surface like your arm. So when the person wanted to pick up something, they'd activate and these muscles would contract just like the human muscle. And I saw those, I said, voila, this is going to work so well for all the sculptures I've been wanting to do. And so then, of course, I go on the internet, I look at air muscles, then I start building my own and trial and error until I finally get a design that doesn't explode, because they tend to blow up like a balloon if you put too much pressure on them. That's fun too, by the way.
And I saw that video you sent me, and those air muscles are amazing because they actually look like some kind of organ, like internal organ, out of a robot, right? And the way they move, and you were showing how they can be molded into different ways, and it was just amazing.
Super cool. And they're very powerful. So it just solves all these problems I was having for many, many years. I used to hide the air cylinder, put a curved piece of metal to make it, go around the curve mechanically. And now I can take this muscle and stretch it around the body and make something move. That's one of those, research projects that really paid off. Most other research has to do with technique or the history of chastity belts. I mean, there's different types of research you can do. Just make the pieces better. You should know the history of what you're working on. The history of blacksmithing is really important. The history of jewelry making. What was jewelry used for? What was the preciousness, the mystical value of it, the idea that it's close to the human body. All these things you can add into your design if you do a little research on it.
So do you sketch out your designs as well? Do you start with a sketch?
I start with a mental concept. What do I want to show here? And then I go to Starbucks and I take a napkin and a pencil and I start scribbling and I work on kind of how I would arrange, what do I want to do here? How do I want to make this move? Okay. Then I will go to my studio, my mannequin, and take my magic marker and start drawing on the mannequin. So there's my first sketch. Well, first the napkin, then the mannequin, okay? Then after I start doing this stuff on the mannequin, I start taking tape, masking tape, and bending it around, and adding and then cutting it away with a razor blade and peeling it back. And now I'm getting forms that are fitting what I want. Okay, so now once I get that, now I go back to the sketch pad. I'll take a picture of that, I'll sketch it out, trace it, and then modify the sketch. And then I start adding the mechanical components. Now I have something to work with that I can fasten these mechanical components to, something that looks really cool. Often when you adjust your design to fit the mechanical component, you lose the whole feel of the piece. I lose the whole feel of the piece. I like to make sure I have my aesthetics down before I add the mechanic. For the new work, older work, they both work very evenly together.
So now it's aesthetic heavy, and then you figure out how to incorporate the mechanics to make sure that the aesthetic is still in place of what you envision.
It's aesthetic heavy, but the mechanics must make the aesthetics better. No gratuitous stuff. Everything has to make it better. There's an old thing we do in the art world is, if you make a mistake, or they call it a happy accident, that kind of thing. Make it look deliberate. And don't just make it look deliberate, make sure it is deliberate when you're done with that mistake. It really helps the design. If you're just covering it up, it doesn't work. But if that mistake leads to a much better design, go with it. Take the serendipity and go with it.
And for some of these pieces, you've incorporated the air tanks right onto the piece itself. You can pressurize them, and then you don't have to have like this thing that's connected to it. You can pressurize it, and it does its thing right on the piece itself.
That's one of the requirements. I set these boundaries when I design the pieces. One of them, if it's going to be mechanical and kinetic, it must be self-powered. It can't be tethered or plugged into a wall. I think it's cheating in some way because it takes away the independence, the idea that this is you and you own it. You aren't tethered to anything. So I found that when you're working with steel and to make something work mechanically, you got a few options. One could be electrical. You certainly see robotic things, battery packs and stuff. I'm not very fond of the aesthetics of robotics, of circuit boards, of electronics, servo motors. It doesn't do a lot for me. The other way to go is pneumatics. Now, pneumatics has a lot of power. You can use compressed air in a small space, and you can make it move, heavy parts in the human body, in the sculpture on the human body. And it became my power source of choice. Pneumatics are, and it's fluid. The idea that something flows through it and it forms fluid movement, I found I found that very comfortable to work with, aesthetically and mechanically. Oh, also, hey, if you're going to have this thing go down the runway, it has to be independent again. Like the arbitrator was a great example. The arbitrator, where two people negotiate in good faith or else, right? And it has a timer, so you can't stall for time. People always want to get in negotiations, they stall. You can't lie. It has a built-in lie detector. And if you stall for time, pressure builds up and eventually crushes you. So you got to come to an agreement. That you can take to a mountaintop, independent. You don't have to plug it into a wall. You can take it anywhere in the world, any place, and do your negotiation and your arbitration right there. So it's just a great conceptual idea to add into another layer on these pieces, another layer of interest on the development, the design development of this work.
And you've always had this mind that is curious. It sounds like even as a child, I was reading, you weren't really interested in playing with your toys. You like to pull them apart and see how they work. So you've always had this. You've always had this mind of trying to figure out how things work, right?
My mom's to my mom's abhorrence, she would give me a gift as a kid that was taken apart before the night was over. I had to take it apart. I would still get my toy, because it was a holiday and I knew what I wanted to get. But more important, I wanted to know how it worked. Take that thing apart and then make it into something else. I was doing that really young. What I found interesting is a toy that everybody loves and is very popular. It's called Legos. There's a whole exhibition. And I detest Legos. I find them irritating. And I no offense to Legos. It's a great toy and people can explore and do all sorts of research with it. But it's a right angle device. Everything goes together in angles and angles and angles. And okay, you put a bunch of angles together and you get a curve. But it's cold. I get a cold feeling when I work with Legos. I never got into it as a kid. I got a Lego set and I just never liked it as a kid, So it just gives you an example how I'm saying that because it's how my head works. My head doesn't like Lincoln Logs. It doesn't like Tinker Toys. It doesn't work with that. I'm trying to think of a toy that I love. It works best when I take a toy apart. That's the best toy I can get.
And it sounds like you still do that to this day sometimes.
If I find something, if the vacuum cleaner, you got to take it apart. If you find a machine, I got to know how it works. Like I used to go to a flea market with my buddy Mike, and we used to have this wonderful. Every Sunday we go to the flea market with $20 in our pocket. And we'd go our own way. We'd come back to the car and show each other the treasures we got for $20. One of the biggest challenges was find a tool that neither one of us knew what it was for, or that the other person didn't know what it was for. So that went on and on. That was always a joy, to find something mechanically. We had no idea what it was used for. So we'd buy it for $1 or $2 and try to figure it out. Usually a mechanism, some kind of mechanism.
I love that. What a great exercise.
Yeah, it was fun. A lot of fun.
So you guys would just set a $20 limit and just go wander around.
Yeah, you don't want to go past 20 because it's just too tempting. You'll spend it on, you'll find something bigger to spend it on, so you won't look as hard. It's always good to find that little jewel for that's pennies, but really, really engaging. My friend Mike used to use the term, he used to say, I marvel in how that works. He used the word marvel. And I marvel at a mechanism when it works right, which goes to another thing. Often I'll make a piece and I'll go back to it a year or two later and not know how the hell I built it. I'll marvel at the piece. I'll say, wow, you did this? How did you do this? And then I have to go through over and over again to figure this thing out again. So it's a process that I enjoy. I enjoy forgetting sometimes. Maybe get something new out of it.
I love the fact that, I've seen the one video you were in your workshop and you have all these different machinist tools, lathes and presses and all these different tools. I love the fact that you have the ability to, not only are you crafting these pieces of art, but you're also crafting tools that you need in order to make these, I assume.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's super critical. If you're working in metal and you're trying to do a project, I don't think there's a machinist, a blacksmith, a metalworker out there who buys straight off the shelf the tool they need for the job. Almost all of them, if they're doing custom work, they're going to make something that helps them get from point A to point B. In my case, I often have to sharpen and form and work on radiuses to get metal to curve around. So I'm going to be making these tools that I need to get from point A to point B. Half my shop is designed just for tool making. Half of it, that mill and those grinders and benders, a lot of that stuff has to do with making tools that will allow me to form metal the way I want to form it. It's critical. You can't possibly do any of this work without making literally hundreds of tools on a project. And a tool could be as simple as taking a burr and cutting off half that burr so you have a triangular edge that'll take a sharp edge off your metal. Or maybe taking a punch and polishing the inside with a groove so when you use a reciprocating hammer, it upsets the metal. There's many, many things you can do that make your work special and more refined when you can make your own tools. Plus, you can save a ton of money.
I am marveled by people that have that ability that have that skill set. I feel like maybe that's becoming a lost craft. Do you agree?
I don't know. I'm in a very small world. I'm around my friends who make art, make metalwork, blacksmiths, jewelers, and all of them are. And blacksmithing is more popular than ever. People are doing a lot of jewelry design now, more on a hobbyist level, retirement level, but they're still doing it and they want to learn about it. Is it something done for profession? It's probably less of that now.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was going with that. I don't know. I don't hear a lot of kids involved in learning how to become a machinist. I know that there's programs out there, but I just think that I think back to my great uncle and how he had his own shop with all these machinist tools. And, if he needed something, he was a farmer, but if he needed something, he just made it. Or if something broke, he just made the new part for it if he could.
That's going by the wayside. Yeah. Right now, if you're a machinist, you better know how to program. Everything's going to be computer controlled machines. And if you don't know how to program, you ain't a machinist. That's how it goes. What I do, the techniques I use out in the garage are turn of the 20th century techniques. There's very few things I do that are more sophisticated than anything they did at the turn of the 20th century. I'm really a dinosaur when it comes to digital design. I mean, I don't use any 3D printing or 3D modeling. I may use CAD only for public art, where I need to make a very precise piece and do it only once and not have a second chance. Everything has to be planned out. And I learned that. I certainly have written some programs, mostly robotic programs for earlier work. I don't enjoy it. And I focus pretty much on what you're seeing me do now.
So you have this series that you've been working on, the Chastity Couture or Impenetrable Devices series. Are you going to continue to work on that? Are you going to continue just to add to that? Or do you see the light at the end of the tunnel where you're like, all right, I've kind of done that now, and now I'm going to move on to something else?
Well, I lean back because I think I am getting to the end of the line on the chastity safe but sexy concept. I like engaging in the human body. I don't think I'm going to give up on that. I think it'll be something that works with the human body internally, coming to the outside. The metaphor, I don't know if I call it a metaphor, but the symbols of how we respond to ourselves, physically and mentally, but using the human body as a subject, as a platform for that. I think it's going to go that way. I'm not sure. I like where it's going now, which looks like it's going that way. But who knows? Maybe I'll be doing. I always wanted to build an amusement park ride, so who knows? I have some ideas of how I'd like to design an amusement park ride, so it's always been a fantasy of mine. Maybe I'll have the liberty to do that. Who knows?
That thought actually crossed my mind as I was doing research for this interview today and looking at your work. So that's interesting that you brought that up. There's a piece that you made that it kind of along the lines of that, and I thought the concept was brilliant, and I loved seeing it in action. The chaperone. Talk about that piece for a moment.
The chaperone was a segue between Panaceas to persistent problems and Impenetrable Devices. The idea of the chaperone was a large mechanized piece that would put adults into timeout if they were to engage in sexual indiscretion. That's the concept. So how to do this? And I really bit off more than I can chew in many ways, because I made the first mistake I made, or maybe the first thing that makes it so great, is that it's made out of stainless steel. And I worked in stainless a little bit, but not on a large scale. And anybody who works in metal knows stainless is just a booger to work with. It's tough as nails, and it's hard to finish out. But when it's done, it stays beautiful and never oxidizes. It's almost worth all the effort. Okay, so I'm trying to think, how would I make this work? Well, people they want to get together, they want to be intimate, they want to be close, but then they can't control themselves. Things are getting out of hand. So they come and visit this artist, and the artist puts them into the chaperone. So now think about the piece I made before that, the one that was the arbitrator. Two people get into this device, and they negotiate in good faith. They're working with each other or else, right? So now I put two people into this device, and they can do anything they want, but I guarantee they won't get in trouble, because if they exchange any moisture at all, a circuit connects, and these big pistons expand out, and these big counterweights go out, and the individuals are lifted up in the air and into an adult timeout. And then they're up there flailing around and spinning and having a good time. And then they come back down again. And now they can be with each other again and do whatever they want. The piece also was designed to make both individuals look marvelous. So it's not just a device you get into, but you really look great when you put this sculpture on you. You're Superwoman and Superman, when you put this thing on. And it was a big piece. We've taken it to many shows. We've operated it, and it does kind of what it's supposed to do. Conceptually, it's just fine. You get a very strong sense that this thing really does what it's supposed to do. And it's beautiful. Did you see the video?
I did, and it is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, my God, that's an ambitious project to take on just looking at it.
That was a full year. Yeah, that was a big one. And when I was building that one, I was also running the jewelry business. I'm doing these two things simultaneously. So I'm filling jewelry orders and trying to balance a bunch of other stuff. But I was a little younger and I had a little more energy than I have now. So and also I had some very fine assistants who work with me. I wish I could thank them all. There's a long list of names of people who have volunteered and helped me with my work. And I really do appreciate my assistants over the years for help.
And I saw on the website, obviously with COVID, that's probably not happening, but that you do take on interns at times. And I think that's great that you're mentoring other people in whatever project that you're doing, having them, see how you work and learn how to do these things. I think that's fantastic.
I'd say there are two things I miss for COVID, two things I miss a lot. One is I'm a tango dancer, and I really miss tango. I did a lot of it every week. And the second thing is I miss interacting with my students and assistants. To talk about an idea and to go through a technique and to have lunch with them every day and just, get their input. And then like right now we're having a conversation. This is very common to what I would do with my assistants here, almost the same subject. Well, how would you solve that? What inspires you to do that? Well, where should we get this? What do you think? What do you think? And I miss that a lot. And, I miss that social engagement. There's usually only one or two people working here at any particular time. It's strictly volunteer. So we get a lot of one-on-one time.
So you have your studio is actually at your house.
Yes. Yeah.
So like big pieces like the chaperone, were you able to construct that there in your studio? You have a studio space that's large enough to put the whole thing in and figure it all out?
There's some great pictures of my backyard. If you go through the website, you might see, I think there's still a few up there, where once the piece gets too big to be in the studio, we bring it out to the backyard. And they're engineered in such a way that they can all break down and be assembled. So again, it's like that amusement. I remember as a kid watching how they set up carnival, how they put those rides together so quickly. And it was just amazing how all these things bolted together and mechanically worked. And I really did enjoy that. And when I design my bigger pieces, they're designed the same way. They're all in components that bolt together and fit together. Sometimes, like on the chaperone, you need a forklift to lift that boom to the top of the supporting post. So you do need some special equipment to build the thing outside the studio. But everything was built in the studio. No, it was all done in the garage. That's where I built it. That's not the biggest piece I made, by the way. The biggest piece I've done in the garage is the piece that anybody can see right now. Get on the light rail and get off at the Louisiana Street Station. And I have a very large sculpture at that station on the platform. It's called the Stang Machine, Stange. It's named after one of my friends who was a patron of mine who helped me develop tube bending into my design. And he passed away, so I named the sculpture after him. But it's a very large, there it is. It's a very large kinetic sculpture. You can turn this orb on the platform, and these big wheels start interacting with each other, kind of like a locomotive wheel on a train. That was a big piece. That one, but I made it. When we had all the parts done, I couldn't walk in my garage. There was no roof to walk. It was all full of stainless steel.
That's just amazing to me, because I was thinking about this piece earlier, and I'm glad we kind of segued into this whole these commissions that you've done for public art spaces and different organizations. And I specifically wanted to talk about this piece because it's something that even during COVID, people can go out and see, and it's available at any time of the day and check it out. So it's at that station at Louisiana and Pearl, you said.
Right. It's on the platform between the elevators. So you got to go down below by the tracks, and between the two elevators, look up. Most people I notice when I go down there are looking at their feet. They don't even see the sculpture. But if you look up, you'll see this big thing over your head, all these wheels. And if you turn the orb that's on the platform, the wheels will start moving. Those wheels weigh every bit of 1,300 pounds. So when you're turning that wheel on the platform, you're moving 1,300 pounds of steel above your head. And then remember I was saying I had all this dream of building an amusement park ride. If you go to this piece and look at it closely, you're going to see something that's really transparent that says this is what this guy's thinking about. If you look at it, you're going to see these little cars on one of the bent pieces of tubing that looks like it's going down like a roller coaster car going down a rail. And when I built this, I'm using the technology and the structure that might be needed if I was going to design an amusement park ride, because there's much bigger stresses, much heavier material. It's not a piece of jewelry anymore. We're actually moving individuals all around. So this piece lent itself to making me think I could design an amusement park ride. And also the chaperone was another piece. It was an amusement park ride when you think about it. It's a very small one.
How long did it take you to do that commission, the RTD commission?
That was every bit of a year also. That was done for RTD. And they had a panel, and you had to go through a bunch of reviews and architectural reviews and structural reviews, and everybody had to come to a consensus whether they liked the design or not. So it takes a long time. Public art I find very very tedious. It's a lot of work. It's generally the money's not there. It's rarely, for me anyhow, for my work, it's not a profitable way to make art. And if I'm going to put in something, if I'm going to put my heart and soul into something, I think I'd rather do it as a piece of Chastity Couture. I find it much more satisfying. However, having said that, a piece of public art is out there all the time. Everybody can see it anytime they want. It's in my neighborhood. It's hard to find a venue where your work never disappears. It doesn't go in the back room of the museum. So public art has a very special allure that way.
When you do something like that, do you have to have outside sources come in and certify it? Like an outside engineering firm come in and go, okay.
Usually the engineering is approved beforehand.
Okay.
You have to have a certified engineer look at your plans, look at all the stresses, and put their stamp on it. A structural engineer and a mechanical and structural engineer. Once that's done, you build it to those specs, and then I assume they inspect it afterwards. Unlike a house, I don't believe on some projects, the inspector comes in and signs off. On other projects, they approve the engineering before you start it. I really can't remember. That's such a long time ago. I can't remember exactly who came down and looked at the work.
Gotcha. At this point of where you're at in your career, you're not really interested in doing any more public art pieces unless it's.
If I did, it's only the design side. I don't want to build it.
Yeah.
There's some great builders out there. I could name a couple that are just wonderful. And if I was going to design, I would just do the design side of it. Yeah. I don't want to build it. It's draining. I'd rather take my energy and again go back into the work you saw at the gallery and work those skills.
Makes sense.
I tell you, I'm not doing jewelry anymore. I've closed the jewelry business. That's gone. I want to put whatever time I have left, I want to put it into exactly what I think is using all my skills and all my brain cells to make the best work possible. And making lyrical, beautiful jewelry is nice, but it's not where I want to be right now.
Okay. So I didn't realize you'd actually closed the jewelry business and you're not really doing that anymore.
I'm done. Yeah, I'm done with it.
But that's what paid the bills for years and years, right? That was pretty much your daytime job, and then you could do your art.
It was very good to me. And when I give talks at schools, and I'd say I'm a jeweler, and usually it's the jewelry departments that bring me in, strangely enough. I think it would be the sculpture departments, but it's the jewelry departments. And they bring me and I say, you're gonna have to make a living, and you're in the right media to do it because it has intrinsic value. You can make the product very quickly. You can use your imagination. You make people happy, especially if you're making wedding rings. Rarely does somebody buy a piece of jewelry and they aren't joyful about it. It's not like buying a funeral urn or something like this is something that I only meet happy people. It was great. It was a great business.
And a piece of your jewelry is actually in the Smithsonian. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started a series where I was experimenting with forged gold elements, very much like the forged steel elements you see here, and gold mesh formed kind of a very very flowing, twisting gold mesh. And I was introduced as a Smithsonian curator, and they liked the work, and it wound up there. Yeah,
that's pretty special.
It's special, but I hate to say this, but it's one microscopic amount of energy compared to what it takes to build this, to build these pieces. The more recent pieces are like building 100 of those Smithsonian pieces, and it's all tied into one. The time and the energy and the mental effort is all tied into one piece. It's hard for me to describe it. When I talk to people, they look at the work sometimes like, oh, nice piece, Ira, like a piece of jewelry. Well, there's no comparison. A piece of jewelry is something that's very, very easy to make, very simple to complete. You're working with technique and with form, and these you're working with mechanical aesthetics and bigger materials and lots of techniques that you never would dare to use in jewelry. And it takes so much more energy and so much more effort. And the rewards, in my opinion, are so much greater too. But so when you look at my work, if I was going to say, how do I want you to look at it? And I'm a jeweler, I would say, look at it like it's 1,000 pieces of jewelry in that one piece, all working together to form one sculpture. And I think if you look at that work, you'll see all those little pieces of jewelry in there. And I think the time and the way the objects are put together are the structural elements and the artistic elements and the design elements, the way they're put together, you'll see where it's jewelry. It's big jewelry. You can see that background in the work. A jeweler made this.
I think if you look at all the different pieces all the different things that you've designed and the different elements that you've worked with, you can see that thread, that aesthetic that runs through everything that you've done. That piece that is in the Smithsonian, I thought that was just stunning. That wristlet piece, it's just aesthetically, it's beautiful. But yeah, I love how you just put that, when you look at these other couture pieces that, think of it as a multitude of these little pieces of jewelry put together and it's functional.
You look at my jewelry, especially the sculptural work, not so much not the wedding work or the gift work, but the sculptural work. There's a very clear relationship to the work I'm doing now. These tendrils lead into a center point that has a jewel in it that opens up, and then your eye goes back out to the outside again. And look at heartfelt. All this curvy linear mesh feeds into these arteries, which feed into the heart, which is like a gemstone. So your eye is brought into the piece through these tendril shapes. It's the same visual, for no better word, trick that I use in jewelry as I use in sculpture. I catch your eye, I trick your eye into grabbing the edge of the sculpture, and your eye immediately gets brought in by the tendril shape to the detail of the sculpture. I do it deliberately when I design it, and you do it probably unconsciously.
Are you still doing some of that liturgical work still, or is that kind of gone by the wayside too at this point?
I'm going to be making 2 pieces next month that are liturgical, but it's not my. I'm really not that interested in right at this point of drumming up more of that business. I mean, if somebody needs me to make it, I'm more than happy to make it if it's something that fits the need of the organization. Yeah.
Sure. These pieces that you've made for the couture pieces and that sort, these are all for sale, correct? So if somebody actually wanted to buy one, they could. Yeah,
they could. When I was saying about when I was going down the Santa Fe, and talking to gallerists, the price on these things, if you look at what should I get for a piece that has, let's say it has 8 hours a day for a week, at what should I pay myself? $90 an hour. A plumber gets $90 an hour. And then we're going into 3 months of work, and then we got materials, art costs, and then the markup of the gallery. I mean, we're in thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it doesn't become a piece that looks like it's eminently marketable at first. Having said that, yes, I have sold these pieces. One of my collectors, I can tell you who it is Richard Garriott, and he's collected my pieces for his collection. He's the guy that flew himself into outer space. He's for I think 30 million or whatever it was, he put himself into space. Really neat guy, really obviously an adventurous guy, and has this amazing collection of artifacts and art. And he's collected some of my work. So I do periodically sell the work, yeah.
How did that all come about?
Pretty much like this. The news media came down and did a report, and it was syndicated on some, I forget what network it was, and it went around the southern United States, and he was watching the report one night and had enough interest in the piece to give me a call. It's kind of a funny story, because when I got the call, I thought it was somebody just scamming me. Saw the work, and he said, well, here's who I am. I don't know if you know me. I said, no. And he said, is any of your work available? I really, really like it. And I could tell by how he was talking, he understood what I was doing. And I said, oh, let me call you back. I'll see what's available. And I talked to my wife, and I said, I'm not going to call him back. It's a scam. So I called him back anyhow, and we started talking. It's for real. It was for real. Amazing.
That is amazing. That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Are you going to continue to work on the Panaceas to persistent problems?
I suppose the Chastity Couture is the last group of pieces as part of that show. I mean, you could consider it that, because I am a persistent problem in society that has really no answer to it. And so this is the segue away from this is the last, I suppose, component of Panaceas persistent problems. Except I wanted to move away from other devices that are not around the chastity belt framework, the concept of safe but sexy.
Gotcha. What was the name of the one?
Pavlovian trainer?
Pavlovian trainer. Yes. I really wish in the previous 4 years we would have had the Pavlovian trainer available to us for a certain former president. When I looked at that, I was like, oh my God, where was that? Where was that when we needed it?
Well, and I think the arbitrator is the one that's really relevant right now. That's timeless. Yeah. Put people in negotiations. What's going on in the Senate right now? I mean, put people in negotiations, and you're going to get crushed, so you better come to an agreement. You have no choice.
Yeah, you're right. That's very right on. We do need that.
So I think that's even more relevant than the other one. Yeah.
Oh, do you still do workshops? Obviously, probably not since the whole COVID thing, but do you have workshops planned for the future?
Yeah, well, for the future, I've been regularly teaching up in Mendocino, California at Mendocino Art Center. There's a great jewelry department up there, and they've invited me a few times to come up and teach. So I made that kind of a regular thing over the past 10 years. I do some workshops locally. I founded an organization called the Colorado Metalsmithing Association back in the 90s, along with 2 other metalsmiths. And we started organizing workshops, and that organization still continues to this day, and they're doing projects. I'm hoping to approach them. If you're listening, I'm trying to approach them, and I'd be happy to do a full forming workshop or a forging workshop. Most of the workshops, I used to do 2 or 3 a year. Now I'm probably with 1 or 2 a year. That'd be fine. I like teaching. I like it on a small scale. To make my living at it, I could never do it.
Yeah, because you've done a fair amount of it over the years, it looks like, looking at your resume.
Yeah, I used to do a lot. I used to be like an artist in residence, or 1 week in service or workshop, and mostly for other organizations or universities. So that was something I was pursuing for quite a while, and very, very gratifying. I like that a lot.
So what does 2021 hold for you this year? Do you have any other exhibits coming up outside of this Bitfactory?
No exhibits planned. If anybody has a gallery out there that would love to see a collection of my work, I'm here. The show is in storage and it's available. So we have nothing planned for 2020. 2022, we might be doing a show at Bitfactory. I might be doing a one-man. We'll see what happens there. What I learned is a couple things. I learned that it's very hard to make art and promote art at the same time. Generally, the general percentage that I've learned over the years is that if you're going to be successful at anything, you better put 60% of your time into promoting it. It just doesn't work to make the work and expect anything to happen without getting out there and actively promoting and knocking on doors. I find that exhausting. So I had to make a decision. If I'm going to be an artist, do I want to promote or do I want to make? And recently I'm leaning towards I got to make more work. It's time to just make more work. And we'll see what happens. If it gets shown, if it gets known, great. If not, at least I've made this body of work and I'm content with that. But I find it very frustrating to market it, and to promote it when the real joy is making the work. That's the joy.
So I got a quick question. Going back to doing a one-man show, how many pieces do you have generally in a one-man show if you were to take it on the road? I am
now, I could probably get together about 40 pieces. I could do a museum show now. We got enough. Over the years, I've been doing this for 45 years. So, but you put the jewelry and the liturgical and the Panaceas for persistent problems, Impenetrable Devices, and then finally Chastity Couture. That's a pretty good body of work. And I can get a lot of that work back from either collectors or people who own the work. And I have a good collection of it myself. So I could put together a pretty big show if I wanted. So small gallery like Bill's, what do we have in there? 15, 20 pieces. A big show, we could put 40 pieces in.
Wow. Okay.
And that does not include some of the really big ones like the Chaperone and Furby's frenetic workout. We haven't talked about that. I don't know if you saw the video of Furby's frenetic workout. I mean, that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, speak to that just a little bit real quick.
Okay, so one of the shows I was working on, I had this great idea. I thought it was a great idea. My kids were playing with these toys called Furbies. And anybody who knows about Furbies, you can't shut them off. And they're actually plain creepy. They are robotic and they learn language and they're just creepy. So I took them apart, and obviously had to take them apart, see what makes them tick. And I started hacking into their outputs, all the little computer outputs that turn the motors and the eyes. And I made those work hydraulics and pneumatic cylinders on sculptures. So I started a series, toys that play with people rather than people that play with toys. So these were big sculptures that people get into, and the toy just gives them the ride of their life. And the Furby, because you can't shut them off, decides when it's done playing with you. So I thought it was brilliant, and it really was humorous and ambitious. I mean, some of the projects that I built on this are big, but it wasn't long-term gratifying. I kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve and then move on. It was definitely that wacko artist in garage taps into the toy's brains. It was that kind of humor. And there's a lot of videos out there of those working. You got to look for them, but they're online.
Would you like to do a retrospective of your work?
Love it. It's time. Yeah, for sure. I'm 70 years old. It's time.
I think it'd be awesome to see all the different facets of your work in one place. I really do.
Okay, you're an agent. You're hired.
Okay.
You're on. Let's do it.
Well, I think it would be interesting to see the progression too, because that's a part of it as well. And having all those pieces in one place, you can kind of, especially if you kind of lay it out chronologically, you can see the progression of all the different pieces. That would be kind of fun.
Well, I think you'd see something else that's not just a progression. You're going to see an overlap. And then you'll see the overlap pull apart. And then you'll see it overlap again, but move on with another collection. And that's pretty much how I design. I rarely stop here and start there as a progression. You'll see it. You'll see kind of ideas and designs and materials float in and out, which I think would be very interesting to talk about and see. But you have to have the work to show you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to keep my ears open, and if we can make that happen, I'd love to see that, Ira.
Okay.
Hey. Being an artist, it's a hustle, right? If you're going to be successful and you were able to do it because you had this jewelry business and a well-respected jeweler, what advice would you give young artists?
Well, I think one is, if you want to make a living, and you decide what a living is, but I can't imagine living in this world today if you don't make $80,000 a year. If you can't get that kind of money together in your income, it's going to be very hard to continue doing what you're going to do. So my suggestion is find some form of income that's steady, and then do your art to supplement that income. And maybe if you're lucky, it'll overlap and you'll be able to do your art for that income. That would be my advice. Don't count on the art as your source of income when you're younger. It's just it'll beat the art out of you. You know what I mean? You'll be working so hard and you'll be always dragging behind and getting frustrated. Pretty soon you won't want to make any art anymore because it became a bad experience rather than a good experience. So that's my advice. Look for another job. Look for some other skill. Teach. A lot of artists, they're natural teachers. A lot of my friends who are very fine artists, finance their art through teaching. So that seems to be one way of doing it. You could see, now I know nothing, zero, about Pinterest or eBay or marketing online. I certainly do a little bit of Facebook posting, zero sales through the internet. That's not, my website is strictly shows the world what I do. It's not a sales website. So I can't give any advice that way at all. My assistants can do that. Talk to my assistants. That's my advice. They'll tell you how they're using the internet to promote their work.
But you've been successful as an artist and have made a living. I mean, making jewelry, that's an art.
How that came about, it's actually a long story, but I think it's pretty relevant. When I came out to Colorado, I really had no skills except that I could make jewelry. And I was taking classes at Metro College at the time. And I was working at a pizza place and a fish and chips place. I was putting together a little collection of silver jewelry. And they'd gamble in the back of this place. And I'd set up a little case. And, it's like a little Las Vegas. Anybody who got their winnings wanted to buy a gift for their wife. So I'd sell them a piece of jewelry, and that was my first sales, of jewelry, and I started word of mouth, one by one, talking to people that, hey, I'm a jeweler, I can do this, and I had a lot of friends. We used to play volleyball in the park, and I had a good network of friends when I was younger, and they were starting to get married, and at the time, I was doing Indian jewelry repair. Remember turquoise Indian jewelry? I was doing a lot of that. And someone said, can you make me a gold Indian jewelry piece? I want to use it for my wedding. And I said, sure. And I never worked with gold in my life. So I had rather than be a liar, I had to figure out how to do it. So that became the modus operandi. Anytime someone said, can you set a diamond? I said, sure. I never set a diamond in my life. So I had to study and learn and do it. And by learning these skills and talking to my friends, they referred other people to me. And my business was 95% word of mouth, almost no advertising. And I found that if I can get a ring made for somebody who worked, say, in a corporation, and they had a lunch room where everybody talked about, or they went out to dinner together, that ring would come up. Look what I got. It's a Sherman piece, and a lot of that is how my business developed, that word of mouth. So very slow, very deliberate, excited about your work. You got to talk about your work. You got to be excited, this is really cool, and get other people excited about it. And if it's sincere, I think that's one way of building a business. I'm not sure it works now. Everybody's kind of on their computer, so I don't know. Again, I don't know.
I think that human connection is still imperative. And we talk to artists all the time, about that relationship that they have with their collectors and how important it is to take time with people when you're showing in a gallery and talk about your work. I mean, it was really great that Bill happened to be there that day, and I was able to discuss your work with him. It would have been this is a whole different deal talking face to face with you, or over the computer, I guess, but that's a special connection, and that's what I enjoy. So I think that's still a valid way of engaging your audience and engaging your collectors.
One of the joys of a show is when you come to that opening, or when you visit, when there's somebody there, you get to see people's reactions to your work. And I used to think that I want to show these people what I'm thinking and what they should think about when they look at my work. I used to have that kind of attitude. And now I take great joy in watching them make up something. What do they think? If I make them look at the world a little differently, maybe one of the ways they look at the world differently is, what would I look like in this piece? How would I feel in this? Would I be empowered? If they can get a little different view of the world from my work, that's very successful and very gratifying. And their different view of the world I may never have imagined in my life. And that's one of the cool things about going to a show and watching people's reactions. And then, like you, some people's reactions are so, maybe they're familiar with my work just from seeing images of it. But then when they see the real work, the person who looks at it comes alive. They start, really, really, really enjoying the process of exploring the work. I would have loved to have been there when you were looking at the work and not let you know I was there, because that's the kind of thing that I really love watching.
Do you plan on being at the gallery anytime between now and the time that the no show ends?
I'll probably visit one more time. I think I want to take some photographs while it's in the gallery setting. I haven't planned on a time yet.
Gotcha. Ira, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you this evening. Anything else that you want to promote, push out, talk about before we sign off for this evening?
Oh, I think we covered a lot. There's probably a lot more, but that's enough for now. We're good.
You know what? When you have some new stuff or the next exhibit that you have, you let us know. I would love to have you back on again and either talk about your work again in some way, shape, or form, talk about the new work that you might be doing and any kind of exhibit that you may be having. You just let us know, and I'll definitely make sure that we push it out on social media, and we'd love to have you back on again.
One of the things I'd love to do, but I don't know, maybe it's better if I do the photography, but I would love to invite you down, have you watch me make one small element, one small forged out element for any of these sculptures. There's a tubular form that I work on that I use in all the newer sculptures. And I think you'd enjoy watching it for a variety of reasons. One is you're in my studio, you're actually seeing the artist's work, but you'll get a concept of how plastic steel is, how easy it is to form and to manipulate. And also you'll see me in a different context. Now I'm working, now it's this context in the studio sitting talking is so rare. I mean, 90% of my time is in the studio being really dirty. So I think if you want to see really what goes on, I'd like to invite you down to the studio.
I would love that. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I look forward to the opportunity to come down and see your work. So as soon as I can, I'd definitely like to come down and check out your studio and even just to see the pieces in person.
Okay, great. Well, we'd love to give you a tour. Love it.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe may COVID be over soon, or at least that we get inoculated so that we can, be at least within the same proximity of each other and not have to wear masks. That'd be nice. That might be a while though, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think you might be right. I think we're a little ways out before we're at that point, unfortunately. But
it takes me a long time to make a piece of work, so. So who knows? I could have 1 or 2 or 3 done maybe by the time COVID starts waning at the rate I'm growing.
So the website again is irasherman.com. I'll make sure that I have it in the episode notes this week, along with his Facebook page, and I'll put some video links up there so you can kind of see, you can get an appreciation for what goes into these pieces and see how they operate and that sort of thing. Ira, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I really appreciate it. I wish you the very best in 2021. I look forward to seeing you sometime in the near future.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure, and we'll keep in touch.
All right.
Absolutely.
All goes well. We'll all be kicking and making good work. So keep up with your stuff. I'll keep up with mine, and we'll meet down at Bitfactory someday.
Sounds great.
Be well.
For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.